You think being evicted immediately after my mother's funeral was the end? No. The end was when my stepfather threw a transfer deed onto the table and told me I had 60 minutes to remove my trash. He smiled, thinking the house was finally his, but he did not know I was not coming back to beg. I was coming back to sit front row while he signed his own sentence. My name is Aurora Lawson, and I was 33 years old when I learned that the depth of human greed has no bottom. The smell of wet earth and lilies still clung to the fabric of my black dress, a cloying scent that made the air in the living room feel thick and suffocating. The funeral service had ended only 2 hours ago. My mother, the woman who had built this house, filled it with music, and kept the walls warm with her laughter, was now 6 feet under the cold ground of the Cedar Hill Cemetery. I had barely stepped through the front door, my hand still trembling slightly as I placed my purse on the entryway table, when the illusion of shared grief shattered. I expected silence. I expected a moment to sit in her favorite armchair and perhaps cry until my lungs ached. I expected my stepfather, Gordon Vance, to pour a glass of whiskey and sit staring at the wall, mourning the wife he had claimed to adore for the last 10 years. Instead, I heard the sharp slap of paper against the mahogany coffee table. Gordon was standing there, still in his morning suit, but the tie was loosened, and the handkerchief he had used to dab at his dry eyes during the eulogy was gone. His face was not swollen with tears. It was flushed with an adrenaline I did not recognize immediately. But my instincts flared like a match struck in the dark. I looked down at the document he had thrown. It was a single sheet of paper, the edges crisp, the font formal and terrifying. At the top, in bold, black letters, it read, "Quitclaim deed." Gordon looked at his watch, a heavy gold piece that he had bought with my mother's money 3 Christmases ago. 1 hour, he said. His voice was devoid of the trembling sorrow he had projected at the graveside. It was flat, transactional, and cold. "You have exactly 1 hour. Get your trash out of here." I blinked, the words failing to register. "Excuse me, I'm selling the house." "Aurora," Gordon said, smoothing his thinning hair back, "I have already listed it. The market is hot right now, and I am not going to sit around letting this place gather dust and bad memories. The new owners want a clean walkthrough by tomorrow morning. I want you gone." The room spun. This was the house where I had taken my first steps, the house where I had nursed my mother through 6 months of agonizing cancer treatments, while Gordon was conveniently busy with business meetings that never seemed to yield a paycheck. "You cannot sell this house," I said, my voice quiet. "Dangerous. This is Mom's estate. The probate hasn't even started. You can't just—" "I can. And I did," Gordon interrupted, tapping a thick finger against the paper on the table. "Look at the signature. Sweetheart, your mother signed the transfer deed 3 weeks ago. She wanted me to have it. She wanted to make sure I was taken care of. It is my legal right." I moved toward the table, my legs feeling like lead. I looked at the bottom of the page. There, on the line marked Grantor, was my mother's name, Eleanor Vance. I stared at the ink. I knew my mother's handwriting better than I knew my own. Her signature was usually a sweeping, elegant thing, full of loops and confidence, even when she was sick, even when the chemotherapy made her weak. She had maintained a certain grace in her hand, but this I leaned closer, the breath catching in my throat. The ink was shaky. The loops were jagged, disjointed, as if the hand holding the pen had been jerking in a rhythm that did not belong to it. The spacing was wrong. The V in Vance trailed off downward. Unlike the sharp upward tick she had used for 40 years, it looked like a signature made by someone whose hand was being guided, or forced, or perhaps forged by someone who had practiced it, but lacked the muscle memory of a lifetime. A chill, colder than the grave I had just left, raced down my spine. "Mom didn't sign this," I whispered. Gordon laughed, a short, barking sound that made my skin crawl. "Don't be delusional." "Aurora." She was weak. She knew she was dying. She signed it right there at the dining table. "I have the notary seal. It is ironclad. Now, stop wasting time. You have 55 minutes left." I looked up at him, really looked at him, and saw the truth. He wasn't grieving. He was calculating. He was vibrating with the nervous energy of a man who had pulled off a heist and was sprinting toward the getaway car. I walked to the window, needing to look away from his smug face. I pulled back the heavy velvet curtain just an inch. Outside, parked directly across the street, was a dark sedan. It was a nondescript American model, black, with tinted windows, but the engine was running. I could see the exhaust puffing into the cool autumn air. Two men were standing by the hood. They were wearing leather jackets that were too tight, smoking cigarettes with a bored, predatory intensity. They were not neighbors. They were not mourners. They looked like the kind of men who broke kneecaps when debts were not paid. Suddenly, the timeline made sense. Gordon wasn't just heartless. He was desperate. He wasn't selling the house to move on. He was selling it to survive. He had debts, dangerous debts. And he needed the equity in this house to pay them off before those men outside decided to come in. He was talking about a buyer, a cash deposit, and closing the file on the very day we buried her. He was liquidating her life to save his own skin. I turned back to him, opening my mouth to call him a liar. But the front door opened behind me. I spun around. Walking through the door was a girl I recognized, though I had only seen her a handful of times. Kara Wells. She was 24, perhaps 25. Gordon had introduced her months ago as a home health aide who was helping with Mom's physical therapy on the weekends. I had never liked her. She was too loud, too curious about the antiques, and she spent more time on her phone than helping my mother to the bathroom. Kara walked in like she owned the place. She was not wearing black. She was wearing a bright red coat that looked jarringly festive against the somber mood of the house. In her hand, she dangled a set of keys. The house keys, my mother's spare set. "Hey, Gordy," she said, her voice grating and high. "The mover said they can be here by 4 o'clock. Is she out yet?" She jerked her chin toward me, not even bothering to address me by name. Gordon smiled at her, a genuine smile. The first I had seen all day. Almost. "Kara. Aurora is just packing her bags." Kara walked past me, brushing my shoulder with deliberate indifference. She headed straight for the hallway that led to the master bedroom. "My mother's sanctuary. I'm taking the master suite." "Obviously," Kara announced, her voice echoing in the high ceilings. "I hate the wallpaper, but we can strip that down next week. Oh, and Gordy, make sure the old woman's clothes are boxed up. I don't want to look at them." The disrespect was physical. It felt like a slap. But then, she turned to check her reflection in the hallway mirror, and the world stopped. Resting against her throat, gleaming under the hallway chandelier, was a pendant. It was an antique silver locket with a sapphire center, surrounded by tiny crushed diamonds. My father had given it to my mother on their 10th anniversary. My mother had worn it every single day until she went into the hospital for the last time. She had held my hand, her skin paper thin, and told me, "Aurora, this is for you. When I go, I want you to have this. It is your history." I had looked for it in her jewelry box yesterday. It was missing. I had assumed it was misplaced in the chaos of the hospice care, but there it was, around the neck of the woman who was currently discussing stripping the wallpaper off my dead mother's walls. "That is my mother's necklace," I said. My voice was trembling, not with sadness, but with a rage so white-hot it felt like ice. Kara looked down, touching the stone with a manicured fingernail. She smirked. "Oh, this Gordy gave it to me. A little thank you gift for helping out so much these last few weeks. It's pretty, right? Goes with my eyes." She looked at Gordon, giggling. Gordon shrugged, adjusting his cufflinks. "She's right. Aurora, it's just stuff. Stop being so materialistic. You are 33 years old. Buy your own jewelry. Now, 40 minutes. I am not asking again." I looked at the two of them. The stepfather who had gambled away my mother's trust. The mistress disguised as a nurse who was wearing my inheritance around her neck. They were standing there, united in their greed, looking at me like I was a stain on their new carpet. They expected me to scream. They expected me to cry, to beg, to throw myself on the floor and plead for the house. For the necklace. For decency. They wanted a scene because a scene would prove that I was weak and emotional, just like Gordon had probably told everyone I was. I took a deep breath. The air still smelled of lilies, but now, underneath it, I could smell the rot. I did not cry. I forced the tears back into my ducts. I straightened my spine until it hurt. I looked Gordon dead in the eyes, then shifted my gaze to Kara. I memorized the way the necklace sat on her collarbone. I memorized the shaking of Gordon's hands. I memorized the exact angle of the forgery on the deed. "Fine," I said. My voice was steady. It was the calmest I had ever sounded in my life. Gordon blinked, surprised by the lack of resistance. "Fine. You want to sell it? Go ahead. Sell it." I walked past them, into the guest room where I had been staying. I grabbed my duffel bag. I did not pack my clothes. I did not pack the books. I walked over to the desk and grabbed my laptop. I grabbed the external hard drive where I had backed up the family photos. I grabbed the folder of medical bills I had paid over the last 6 months. I left the rest. I left the furniture. I left the dishes. I left the warmth. I walked back out into the living room. Gordon was already on the phone, his back to me, speaking in a hushed, urgent tone to someone about a wire transfer. Kara was in the kitchen, opening the refrigerator, complaining that there was no wine. I opened the front door. The cool air hit my face. The 2 men across the street watched me. One of them flicked a cigarette butt onto the pavement and nodded at me. A slow, dark acknowledgement that I was leaving the war zone. I stepped onto the porch and closed the door behind me. I stood there for a moment. Through the wood, I heard the heavy mechanical sound of the deadbolt sliding into place. Click. Then I heard Gordon's voice, muffled but triumphant, laughing. They thought they had won. They thought that by locking me out, they had secured their future. They thought I was walking away, defeated, a poor orphan girl with nowhere to go. But as I walked down the steps, clutching the strap of my bag, I wasn't thinking about where I would sleep that night. I was thinking about the handwriting on that deed. I was thinking about the security system my mother had asked me to install 3 years ago, the one Gordon had never bothered to learn how to use. I was thinking about the fact that while they had the keys, I had the passwords. I reached my car and threw the bag into the passenger seat. I looked back at the house one last time. It looked like a tomb now. But tombs are not just for the dead. Sometimes, they are traps for the living. I started the engine. My hands were steady on the wheel. "If you want to sign papers." "Gordon," I said to the empty car, watching the house through my rearview mirror, "I will hand you the pen." I drove away, leaving them to their celebration. The first act was theirs. But the curtain had not fallen yet. It was just rising. The neon sign outside my window buzzed with a rhythmic, electrical dying sound, casting a sickly pink glow across the peeling laminate floor of the studio apartment I had managed to secure an hour after leaving my childhood home. It was a short-term rental, the kind of place that asked for cash up front and did not ask for references. The room smelled of industrial cleaner and stale cigarette smoke, a scent that seemed to seep out of the drywall itself. I sat on the edge of the sagging mattress, staring at the 3 cardboard boxes and 1 duffel bag that now contained my entire life. It is strange how quickly a life can be compressed. 33 years of memories, of comfort, of belonging, reduced to what I could carry in a panic. I pulled a sweater out of the bag. It still smelled like the cedar closet in the hallway of the big house. It smelled like safety. I pressed it to my face and inhaled. But the comfort was fleeting. It was replaced almost instantly by the memory of the look on Gordon's face when he threw that deed onto the table. I did not cry. I was done crying. My tear ducts had dried up somewhere between the 3rd round of chemotherapy and the hospice intake forms. I closed my eyes and let the last 6 months wash over me. It was a tidal wave of sterile white lights and the relentless beeping of monitors. Gordon liked to tell the neighbors how hard we were fighting. He played the part of the devoted husband perfectly when there was an audience, but I was the one sleeping in the plastic recliner next to her hospital bed, waking up every 45 minutes to check her oxygen levels. I was the one arguing with insurance adjusters on the phone in the hospital hallway. trying to understand why they were denying coverage for the pain medication she needed to breathe without screaming. Where was Gordon during those long, hollow nights? He was usually at a business dinner. That was his favorite phrase. I remember one night specifically. About 3 months ago, my mother had just come out of a seizure, terrified and disoriented. I had spent an hour calming her down, holding her hand until her grip loosened into sleep. I walked out to the waiting room to get a cup of coffee, my eyes burning from exhaustion. Gordon was there. He was on his phone, his back to me. He did not hear me approach. "I need 5,000, he was saying, his voice a low hiss. "No, not next week. Tonight, I can move some things around. Just hold the marker." He hung up when he saw my reflection in the glass door. He turned around, his face shifting instantly into a mask of concern. "How is she?" he asked, reaching out to touch my shoulder. "She is sleeping," I said, stepping back from his touch. "Gordon." "Who were you talking to?" He waved a dismissive hand. "Just the accountant. High finance. Aurora. You wouldn't understand the complexities of liquidating assets in a market like this. It is a chess game. I am just trying to make sure your mother has the best care money can buy." I wanted to believe him. I was too tired to fight him, but the doubt planted itself in my gut like a stone. Later that week, I saw the bank statements. They were sitting on the kitchen counter, unopened. Gordon was usually meticulous about hiding the mail, but he had been sloppy that day. I opened the joint account statement, the one meant for household expenses and medical bills. There were withdrawals, massive ones. $2,000 at an ATM in Atlantic City, $4,000 at a consulting firm that, when I Googled it later, turned out to be a shell company linked to an underground poker ring in the city. He wasn't managing her assets. He was bleeding them dry. And then there was Kara. Gordon brought her home 4 months ago. He introduced her as a certified nursing assistant, someone to help with the heavy lifting so I could get some rest. I tried to be grateful. I really did. I was drowning in caregiver burnout. And I thought, finally, some help. But Kara was useless. She did not know how to check a pulse properly. She flinched when she had to empty the catheter bag. Instead of sitting with my mother, she spent her time wandering the house. I would find her in the dining room, running her hands over the silverware. I would catch her in the library, taking selfies with the first edition books my grandfather had collected. One afternoon, I walked into the master bedroom to give Mom her medication. Kara was standing by the dresser. She had the jewelry box open. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice sharp. She jumped, slamming the lid shut. "Just dusting," she said, flashing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "It gets so dusty in here with the windows closed." She wasn't dusting. She was shopping. I told Gordon. I told him I didn't trust her. I told him she was lazy and invasive. "You are being paranoid." "Aurora," he had said, pouring himself a scotch. "You are stressed. Kara is a godsend. She is cheap, and she is available. Do you want to pay an agency triple the rate? We have to be smart with the money." Smart with the money. The irony was suffocating, but the true depth of his depravity didn't hit me until the funeral. It was this morning, though it felt like a lifetime ago. The service was solemn. The church was full. My mother was loved by the community. She had been a teacher for 30 years, a volunteer, a pillar. People came to pay their respects. Gordon stood at the front of the receiving line. He looked the part of the grieving widower perfectly. He dabbed his eyes. He hugged the older ladies who brought casseroles, but I was standing right next to him. I heard what he was really saying. When the local real estate developer, Mr. Henderson, came up to shake his hand, Gordon didn't talk about my mother's kindness. "Thanks for coming." "Bob," Gordon said, gripping the man's hand firmly, "we should grab lunch next week. I'm going to have some prime acreage opening up. We can talk about that zoning issue." At his wife's funeral, when a man from the bank offered condolences, Gordon leaned in. "I'll have that liquidity issue sorted by Friday. Don't worry about the collateral. It's securing." He was networking. He was using my mother's casket as a conference table. I must have looked disgusted because, at one point, he leaned over to me, His breath smelled of mints and stale alcohol. He gripped my elbow, his fingers digging into the soft flesh of my arm. "Stop scowling," he whispered, his voice low and venomous. "You look like a miserable child. Smile at the guests. You are ruining my image." I pulled my arm away. "Your image. We need these people. Aurora, don't be stupid." That was when I realized it wasn't just greed. It was survival. Gordon was terrified. The realization fully formed when I saw the car outside the house later that afternoon. The black sedan. The men in the tight leather jackets. They weren't just watching. They were waiting. Gordon owed money. A lot of money. He wasn't selling the house because he wanted to move to a condo in Florida. He was selling the house because if he didn't come up with a massive lump sum of cash within days, those men were going to hurt him. He had gambled away his own money. Then he had gambled away the money meant for my mother's treatment. And now, he was gambling with the roof over my head. I sat up on the motel bed, the anger rising in my chest, hot and steady. He thought I was helpless. He thought I was just the daughter who made soup and organized pill bottles. He thought I didn't understand finance, but he forgot one thing. My mother might have been sick, but she was never stupid. About 2 weeks before she died, she had a moment of lucid clarity. The morphine had worn off slightly, and her eyes, usually cloudy with pain, were sharp and blue. She had called me close to the bed. Her voice was a whisper, dry like autumn leaves. "Aurora," she had said, "I am here. Mom, the system." She gasped. "The house system." I thought she was delirious. We had installed a smart home system years ago, cameras, automated locks, climate control. Gordon hated it. He called it spyware and refused to learn how to use the app. He made me manage it. "What about it?" "Mom." "Do you remember the admin password?" she asked. "Not the guest one. The root one." "Yes." "Mom, I set it up. It's your birthday and the name of your first dog." "Good," she whispered, closing her eyes. "Keep it. Don't give it to him. He doesn't look at the details." I hadn't thought much of it at the time. I thought she was just being protective of her privacy. But now, sitting in this dingy room, her words echoed in my head like a command. He doesn't look at the details. Gordon was arrogant. He believed that because he held the deed, even a forged one, he held the power. He believed that because he had changed the physical locks on the doors, he had secured the fortress. He didn't know that the house had eyes. He didn't know that 3 years ago, when we installed the security upgrade, I had set up a local server in the basement utility closet. It was a redundant backup system, meant to store footage locally in case the internet went down. It was hidden behind a stack of holiday decorations. Gordon never went into the utility closet. It was too blue-collar for him, if that server was still running, and it should be. It was hardwired into the home's grid, then it had been recording. It would have recorded everything. It would have recorded the living room, the hallway, the study where Gordon kept his safe. I reached for my laptop bag. My hands were not shaking anymore. I felt a strange, cold calm settling over me. It was the calm of a surgeon picking up a scalpel. I opened the laptop and waited for the screen to glow to life. I did not connect to the motel Wi-Fi. I didn't need the internet for this. I needed the remote administration tool I had installed to monitor the house temperature when Mom was alone. I typed in the IP address of the home server. The screen flickered. A spinning wheel appeared. Connecting, I held my breath. If Gordon had cut the power, or if Kara had stumbled upon the server and unplugged it to charge her phone, this was over. The wheel spun for 10 seconds, 20 seconds. Then, the screen flashed green. Connection established. Enter password. I typed it in. Eleanor Barnaby, 1955. The screen changed. A grid of camera feeds popped up. My heart hammered against my ribs. I wasn't looking at a memory. I was looking at live footage. There was the living room, grainy in the night vision mode. I could see Gordon sitting on the sofa, a bottle of champagne open on the table. He was laughing, his head thrown back. There was Kara, walking through the frame in a silk robe, my mother's silk robe, holding a wine glass. They were celebrating. They were drinking to their victory. I moved my cursor to the History tab. Gordon said he had the legal right. He said the signature was real. He said he was in control. I clicked on the calendar icon, scrolling back to the date on the deed. The date he claimed my mother had signed away her legacy. I wasn't here to mourn anymore. I wasn't here to cry over unfairness. I was here to watch. I adjusted the screen brightness. If you want to play games with the truth. Gordon, let us see what the camera saw. I hit play. The pixelated glow of my laptop screen was the only light in the cramped studio apartment, casting long, jittery shadows against the wall. Outside, a siren wailed in the distance, a lonely sound that matched the hollowness in my chest. But my mind was sharp, focused on the task at hand. The grief was there, heavy and suffocating, but I had shoved it into a box in the back of my mind. Right now, I didn't need to be a grieving daughter. I needed to be an investigator. I had established a connection to the home server, but that was just the handshake. Getting in was the real challenge. I tried the standard user login for the main smart home interface first. GordonVance_admin. Access denied. Of course, he had changed it. Gordon might be technologically illiterate, but he knew enough to lock the front door. He probably paid some Geek Squad kid $50 to come out and reset the router passwords the moment the hearse pulled away from the driveway. He thought he was clever. He thought by changing the Wi-Fi password and the app login, he had blinded me. But Gordon was a man who looked at the surface of things. He saw the thermostat on the wall. He didn't see the wiring behind it. When my mother's condition had worsened 6 months ago, and Kara had started her shifts, I had a bad feeling. It was a gnawing suspicion that things weren't right. Kara would claim my mother had slept all afternoon, but I would come home to find Mom dehydrated and distressed. So, I had done something I never told Gordon about. I had installed a secondary, independent camera network. It wasn't a high-tech spy movie setup. It was simple. Practical consumer gear. 3 small, motion-activated cameras hidden in plain sight, one on the bookshelf in the study, disguised as a black spine of a notebook. One in the living room, tucked into the foliage of a fake ficus plant, and one in the hallway, integrated into a smoke detector housing. These cameras didn't run on the main Wi-Fi. They communicated directly with a small, localized server, a Raspberry Pi unit with a 2-terabyte hard drive that I had taped to the back of the ventilation duct in the basement storage room. It created its own hidden subnetwork. Unless you were scanning for specific radio frequencies or physically dismantling the HVAC system, you would never find it. And Gordon wouldn't know a Raspberry Pi if he ate one. I opened a terminal window on my laptop. I wasn't hacking the Pentagon. I was just accessing my own equipment. But my hands were sweating. I typed in the command to bridge the connection to the hidden subnet. Enter passphrase. I paused. I remembered the day I set it up. Mom was sitting in her wheelchair by the window, watching the birds. She had asked me what I was doing, and I told her I was just fixing the internet. She had smiled and said, "Make sure it's secure, Aurora, like the time we locked the diary." The diary. When I was 12, we had a shared diary with a combination lock. The code was the date of the best day we ever had a trip to the coast where we saw whales. August 12th, 2005. I typed it in, Whale Watch 081205. The cursor blinked once, twice, access granted. A grid of folders appeared on the screen, organized by date. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. I was in. I didn't start with today. Today was just the aftermath. I needed the smoking gun. I needed the moment the plan was hatched. I scrolled back. The timeline. Gordon produced the deed today, claiming it was signed 3 weeks ago, but the notary stamp I had glimpsed it was dated for yesterday. I clicked on the folder dated yesterday. The files populated. Living_room_cam. Study_cam. Hallway_cam. I opened the file for study_cam labeled 22:45, 10:45 at night. The night before the funeral, the video player launched. The image was crisp, black and white from the infrared night vision. The study was my mother's favorite room. It was where she graded papers, where she wrote her letters. Now, it looked like a conspirator's den. Gordon was sitting at her mahogany desk. He wasn't grieving. He was leaning back in her leather chair, a glass of amber liquid in his hand. I squinted at the screen. The bottle on the desk, it was the Macallan 25 my father had bought the year I was born. Saving it for my wedding. Gordon had cracked it open on a Tuesday night. Kara was there too. She was leaning over the desk, holding a stack of papers. She was wearing a t-shirt and sweatpants, looking completely at home. I turned up the volume on my laptop. The audio was a bit tinny, picking up the hum of the refrigerator in the next room, but the voices were clear enough. "The loops are too wide," Gordon was saying. He pointed at the paper. "Eleanor didn't write like that." Kara laughed, a sharp, dismissive sound. "Who cares? Gordy, she had Parkinson's tremors at the end. Remember? Or at least, that's what we tell the judge if anyone asks." "Oh, poor Eleanor. Her hand was so shaky." "It needs to look authentic," Gordon grumbled, taking a swig of the scotch. "If the bank rejects this, we are dead." "The bank won't reject it," Kara said, grabbing a pen from the desk, my mother's favorite fountain pen. She leaned down and scribbled something on a scrap piece of paper. "Look, just drag the pen a little at the end, like you're tired. See?" My stomach turned. They were practicing. They were literally workshopping my dead mother's signature like it was an art project. Gordon looked at her practice attempt. "Better," he muttered. "But the date. We have to backdate it. If we date it for today, it looks suspicious. She was already in the morgue." "Duh," Kara said. "I dated it for the 21st, 3 weeks ago, right before she went into the coma. Perfect timing. She was lucid but weak." "That's the narrative." "The signature is too shaky. Is it going to be okay?" Gordon asked, his voice laced with anxiety. Kara patted his shoulder. "It just needs to pass the clerk at the county office. They don't check for forensic handwriting analysis. Gordy, they check for a stamp. And since I still have my notary stamp from my old job, who is going to question it?" I froze. A notary stamp. Kara had a notary stamp. That was the piece of the puzzle I had missed. She wasn't just a witness. She was the mechanism of the fraud. Suddenly, a harsh buzzing sound cut through the audio. Gordon's phone was vibrating on the desk. He picked it up. The color drained from his face even in the monochrome video. He put the phone on speaker, a habit he had, because his hearing was going, though he refused to admit it. "Yeah," Gordon said, his voice trying to sound tough but cracking. A male voice came through the speaker. It was deep, calm, and terrifyingly professional. "Mr. Vance, it is 11 o'clock. "I know what time it is," Gordon snapped. "I told you, I'm handling it." "The interest compounded at midnight," the voice said. "You are sitting on 150 large. Gordon, my boss is getting impatient. He doesn't like it when people enjoy his money without paying the rent on it." "I am selling the house," Gordon shouted, then lowered his voice, looking at the door. "I am selling the house. The deed is done. I just need to file it and get the buyer to close. It's a cash deal. Fast." "When?" "A few days. Maybe a week." There was a silence on the line. Then the voice spoke again, softer this time. "You have 72 hours. Gordon, after that, we don't take the house. We take a finger. Little finger first, then the thumb. You need those to hold a pen. Don't you?" The call ended. Gordon sat there, the phone still in his hand, looking like a ghost. Kara looked less cocky now. She was chewing her lip. 72 hours, she whispered. "Can we clear the title that fast?" "We have to," Gordon said, slamming his hand on the desk. "We have to get that bitch Aurora out of here tomorrow. If she drags her feet, if she calls a lawyer." "She won't," Kara said. "She's weak. She's a doormat. You saw her at the hospital. She just cries and signs whatever the doctors give her. Kick her out. Change the locks. Sell the place to that investor you found, and we are on a plane to Cabo with the difference." I paused the video. I sat back in the dark room, the silence ringing in my ears. I had it. I had everything: conspiracy to commit fraud, forgery, evidence of illegal gambling debts, predatory intent. My finger hovered over the download button. I could take this to the police right now. I could drive to the precinct, show them the video, and have a patrol car at the house within the hour. Gordon would be arrested, Kara would be detained. But then I thought about what Miles, my mother's old lawyer, had told me once about the justice system. Video is great, Aurora, but intent is hard to prove in a way that sticks quickly. If you arrest him now, he claims he was under duress. He claims the signature was authorized verbally before she died. He gets bail. He drags this out in civil court for 3 years while he lives in your house and destroys it. If I stopped him now, I would only be stopping an attempt. Attempted fraud is a lesser crime. He might get probation. He might even talk his way out of it, claiming he was just practicing and never intended to file it. No. I looked at Gordon's face on the screen, frozen in a mask of desperate greed. I didn't want him to almost commit a crime. I needed him to finish it. I needed him to walk into a closing office, present that forged deed, swear under oath that it was real, and accept money for a property he didn't own. I needed the transaction to be complete. That was the point of no return. That was grand larceny. That was wire fraud. That was federal prison time. I needed him to think he had won. I needed him to feel the money in his hand. I closed the laptop, a cold resolve settling in my gut. You want 72 hours. Gordon, I will give you exactly that. I wasn't going to the police, not yet. I was going to let him play his hand. And when he went all in, I would be the one turning over the river card. I spent the next 3 hours in that motel room, descending deeper into the digital rabbit hole of my own home. If the first video was the smoking gun, the subsequent files were the entire ballistics report. I had always assumed Kara was just a trophy, a bit of arm candy Gordon had picked up to soothe his ego while his wife was dying. I thought she was vacuous, a woman who cared more about her manicure than the complexities of fraud. I was wrong. Kara wasn't the passenger. She was the navigator. I opened a file dated 2 days before the funeral. The timestamp was mid-morning. Gordon was pacing the living room, wringing his hands. He looked like a man on the verge of a cardiac event. "What if the buyer asks about Aurora?" Gordon asked, his voice high and thready. "She's listed as the next of kin on the medical forms. If they do a title search and see her name anywhere..." Kara was sitting on the sofa, filing her nails with a calm, rhythmic precision. She didn't look up. "Stop panicking. Gordy," she said. "We have a narrative for that. Remember the script." "The script," Gordon repeated, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Yes, if the buyer asks, or the title company calls, you say this: Aurora is troubled. You look sad when you say it. You say, my stepdaughter has had a long history of mental instability since her mother got sick. She's currently in a facility upstate, and she has signed a waiver of interest to pay for her treatment." My jaw tightened. Troubled. In a facility. They were erasing me. They were turning me into a tragedy to explain my absence. Kara blew on her nails. "People don't want to dig into family drama. Gordy, it makes them uncomfortable. If you say mental health crisis, they shut up and sign the check because they want to be polite. It's the perfect cover." I clicked to another video. This one was in the bedroom. Kara was standing by my mother's vanity, the one made of rosewood that my grandfather had carved by hand. She was pulling open drawers with a casual violence, dumping the contents onto the surface. She picked up a brooch, a diamond and pearl piece that had belonged to my great-grandmother. "This is old," she muttered, holding it up to the light. "The setting is dated, but the stones are good. We can pop them out and sell them loose. Probably get 3 or 4 grand. "Just sell the whole thing," Gordon said from the doorway. "I don't have time to find a jeweler who asks questions." "You're an idiot," Kara retorted. "If you sell it whole, it's traceable. If you sell the stones, it's just raw materials. I learned that when I worked at the escrow firm. You have to strip the identity off the asset before you move it." The escrow firm. I paused the video and opened a new browser tab. I searched for Kara Wells' LinkedIn. It took a few tries, but I found an old profile. Kara Wells, Administrative Assistant, Bayside Title Trust, 2018 to 2021. She wasn't a nurse. She never was. She was a former title clerk. She knew exactly how the paperwork moved. She knew where the loopholes were. She knew how to fake a notary seal because she had probably stamped thousands of legitimate ones. Gordon hadn't found a caregiver. He had recruited a professional accomplice. I went back to the server files. I needed to see how far they had gone with the sale. I found a recording from the study. Just 12 hours ago, Gordon was sitting at the computer, my mother's computer. He was typing furiously. "I sent the email," he said, leaning back. "It went out to the list." "Which account did you use?" Kara asked. "Eleanor's. The password was saved in the browser. It looks better coming from her. Right, like she was initiating the sale before she died." I felt a surge of nausea. He was wearing my dead mother's digital skin. He was using her email address, her voice, to sell her own home. It was a violation so intimate it felt physical. I needed to know who he was emailing. If I could access her email, I could see the recipients. I opened Gmail on my laptop. I knew her password, she had never changed it. Blue Hydrangea 77. I logged in. The inbox was flooded with condolences, but I went straight to the sent folder. There it was. An email sent yesterday at 4 p.m. Subject: urgent sale, estate liquidation, cash only. It was sent to a dozen local real estate investors, the kind of we buy ugly houses predators who paid cash and didn't ask questions. But as I scanned the email chain, my eyes widened. Gordon had attached an inventory list. Items included in the sale: antique furniture, jewelry collection, master bedroom suite, and the Coastal Series oil paintings in the hallway. I froze. The Coastal Series. Those weren't just paintings. They were 3 landscapes painted by a local artist in the 1990s. My mother loved them, but she didn't own them, not technically. 2 years ago, she had loaned them to the town's Cultural Heritage Fund for a rotating exhibit, but because of the pandemic, they had been returned for safekeeping. They were still legally the property of the Heritage Fund, held in trust at our house. There was a signed consignment agreement in the safe. Gordon didn't know that. To him, they were just pictures on the wall. If he sold those paintings, he wasn't just stealing from me. He was stealing from a non-profit organization. He was selling stolen artwork across state lines if the buyer was out of town. That wasn't just fraud. That was a federal offense involving cultural property. A plan began to form in my mind. A jagged, dangerous plan. I couldn't let him sell the house to an innocent family. If a nice young couple bought it, they would be tied up in litigation for years when I sued to get it back. They would lose their deposit. They would be victims. I couldn't do that, and I couldn't let him sell it to one of these sharks in the email chain. They might strip the house of its copper wiring before I could get a court order. No. I needed a buyer I could control. I needed a buyer who didn't exist. But to pull that off, I needed help. I needed someone who knew the law better than Kara thought she did. I closed the email and picked up my phone. I scrolled through the contacts until I found a name I hadn't called in years, but one my mother had trusted implicitly. Miles Barrett. He was my mother's estate attorney. He was an old-school lawyer, suspenders, a chaotic office that smelled of pipe tobacco, and a mind like a steel trap. He had written her will. He had written the deed, the real deed. I looked at the time. It was almost midnight. He wouldn't answer. But I called anyway. It rang 4 times. Then, a gruff, sleepy voice answered. "This better be an emergency, or you better be dead," Miles grumbled. "It's Aurora," I said, "and I'm not dead. But Gordon is trying to sell the house." There was a pause, the rustling of sheets. Then the voice was sharp, awake. "He can't sell the house. Aurora. He doesn't own it. He has a deed. Miles. A quitclaim deed. Signed by Mom. Notarized." "That's impossible," Miles barked. "Your mother signed a restriction clause 5 years ago. We locked that title down tighter than Fort Knox." "He forged it," I said. "And I have video proof. But Miles, I don't want to just stop him." What do you want to do? I want him to sell it, I said, my voice cold. I want him to go through the entire process. I want him to sit at a closing table and sign his name. Miles was silent for a long moment. You want to entrap him? I want justice, I corrected. He's selling everything, the jewelry, the paintings that belong to the Heritage Fund. The Heritage paintings. Miles let out a low whistle. That idiot. That's a felony. Exactly, I said. I need you to help me set the table. Miles, I need a buyer, a cash buyer, someone who looks real enough to fool a former title clerk, but fake enough that when the gavel comes down, the money isn't real. Aurora, Miles said, his tone softening. This is dangerous. If he finds out. He won't, I said. He's desperate. He has 72 hours to pay a loan shark, or he loses a finger. He's not looking at the details. He's looking at the exit sign. 72 hours, Miles muttered. Okay, be at my office at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. Bring the laptop. Bring the videos. I will. And Aurora. Yes. Your mother was a smart woman. She knew Gordon was slippery. That's why she added the poison pill to the trust. Poison pill. I'll show you tomorrow, Miles said. She didn't just leave you a house, kid. She left you a weapon. You just have to know how to fire it. I hung up the phone. I walked to the window and looked out at the parking lot. The neon sign was still buzzing. Gordon thought he was the author of this story. He thought he was writing the ending where he walked away with a suitcase full of cash. But he was just a character, and he didn't realize that the genre had changed. This wasn't a tragedy anymore. It was a heist, and I was the one holding the blueprints. The office of Barrett and Crowley was located in a pre-war building downtown, the kind with a lobby that smelled of brass polish and old ambition. The elevator that carried me up to the 14th floor groaned with the weight of its own history, a mechanical sigh that matched the heaviness in my chest. I had not slept. The adrenaline of the night before the discovery of the video, the hacking of the email, the realization of the full scope of Gordon's betrayal had kept me wired, my eyes wide open staring at the water stains on the motel ceiling. I stepped out of the elevator and walked toward the frosted glass doors at the end of the hall. Miles Barrett had been my mother's lawyer for 20 years. He was a man carved out of oak and statute books, a relic of a time when a handshake meant something and the law was a shield, not a weapon. He had attended the funeral yesterday, standing in the back, leaning on his cane, watching Gordon with eyes that missed nothing. I pushed open the door. The receptionist was not there yet. It was barely 8 in the morning. I walked straight back to the corner office. Miles was already there. He was standing by the window, looking out at the gray city skyline, a mug of black coffee in his hand. He turned as I entered. He did not look surprised to see me. He looked like a general who had been waiting for the scout to return from the front lines. You look like hell, Aurora, he said, his voice a low rumble that vibrated in the quiet room. I feel like it, I replied, dropping my bag onto one of the leather guest chairs. But I did not come here to talk about my complexion. Miles, I came here because Gordon is selling the house. Miles walked over to his massive mahogany desk and sat down slowly. He set his coffee mug on a leather coaster. He is trying to sell the house, Miles corrected. There is a difference between trying and doing. He has a deed, I said, pulling my laptop out of the bag. A quitclaim deed. He showed it to me. It has Mom's signature. It has a notary seal. Miles frowned, the lines on his forehead deepening into canyons. That is not possible. Eleanor and I updated her estate plan 5 years ago. We went over every contingency. She was very specific. He forged it, I said. I opened the laptop and spun it around so the screen faced him. And I can prove it. I clicked play on the video file, the one from the study, where Gordon and Kara were practicing the signature, where they discussed the shaky hand narrative, where the loan shark called with his threat of violence. Miles watched. He did not move. He did not blink. He sat with his hands clasped on the desk, his knuckles turning white as the video played. The only sound in the room was the hum of the hard drive and the tinny voices of my stepfather and his mistress plotting to dismantle my mother's legacy. When the video ended, Miles sat in silence for a long time. The air in the room felt charged, heavy with a specific kind of professional rage. Miles was a man who believed in the sanctity of the law. What he had just seen was not just a crime against me, it was a blasphemy against everything he stood for. "That son of a bitch," Miles whispered. It was the first time I had ever heard him curse in 20 years. "He is desperate," I said. "He owes $150,000 to a loan shark. He has 72 hours. He has already emailed investors." Miles reached for the phone on his desk. "I will draft an emergency injunction immediately. We can get a judge to sign a temporary restraining order on the property by noon. We will freeze the title. We will file a police report for forgery and fraud. We will stop this sale before the ink is dry." He started to dial, but I reached out and put my hand over his. "No," I said. Miles froze. He looked up at me, his bushy gray eyebrows knitting together. "No, Aurora. Did you not hear me? He is trying to steal $1 million asset. We have to stop him." "Stopping him isn't enough," I said, my voice steady. "If you file an injunction, what happens?" He claims the video is out of context. He claims he was just testing the pen. He lawyers up. It becomes a civil battle. He stays in the house for months, maybe years, while the court sort it out. He destroys everything inside. He sells the paintings. He breaks the furniture. I leaned in closer. "I do not want to stop him. Miles, I want to end him." Miles slowly put the receiver back in the cradle. He looked at me with a new expression, not pity, but assessment. "What are you asking for?" "Aurora." "I want him to sell it," I said. "I want him to think he has succeeded. I want him to sign the final closing documents. I want him to accept the money. I want him to commit the crime fully, completely, and irrevocably in front of witnesses." Miles leaned back in his chair, the leather creaking. He studied me for a long moment. Then, he turned his chair and rolled over to the wall of filing cabinets behind him. He ran his finger along the labels until he found one marked Vance. "Eleanor." He pulled out a thick, dusty folder. He placed it on the desk and opened it. The smell of old paper wafted up a scent that reminded me of my mother's library. "You are your mother's daughter," Miles said softly. He pulled a document from the back of the file. It was on thick, bonded paper, bound with a blue ribbon. "This," Miles said, tapping the document, "is your mother's last will and testament, the real one, the one we filed with the county clerk under seal, to be opened only upon her death." He flipped to page 12. "Gordon told you he has a right to the house," Miles said. "And technically, under the standard spousal laws, he would have a claim. But your mother knew who she married. She loved him, in her way, but she did not trust him with her history." Miles turned the document so I could read it. "She created a life estate," Miles explained. "Do you know what that is?" "It means he can live there until he dies," I said, my heart sinking. "So he does have a right to kick me out." "Read the rider," Miles commanded. "The addendum of conditional occupancy." I looked at the paragraph he was pointing to. The legal jargon was dense, but the meaning was razor-sharp. "The grantee, Gordon Vance, shall retain a life estate in the property, granting him the sole right of occupancy and use for the duration of his natural life. Provided that 1. He maintains the property in good standing. 2. He pays all property taxes and insurance. 3. He does not attempt to sell, mortgage, encumber, lease, or transfer any interest in the property to a third party. In the event of a breach of any of these conditions, the life estate shall terminate immediately and automatically, without notice, and full fee. Simple ownership and possession shall revert instantaneously to the remainder man Aurora Lawson." I read it twice. "Instantaneously," I whispered. It is a poison pill, Miles said, a grim smile touching his lips. Your mother called it the greedy man's trap. She knew that if Gordon was content to just live there, to just be a widower, he would be fine. He could have lived in that house for 30 years. He could have brought his girlfriends over. He could have drunk his scotch by the fire. Miles leaned forward. But she knew his nature. She knew that eventually, he would try to cash out. He looks at that house and he doesn't see a home. He sees a giant piggy bank. So, I said, the realization dawning on me like a sunrise, the moment he tries to sell it, the moment he signs an agreement to sell, Miles corrected, he loses the right to live there. He evicts himself. By trying to take the equity, he destroys his only legal claim to the roof over his head. A cold shiver went down my spine. It was brilliant. It was cruel. It was exactly something my mother, the chess champion of the local club, would have done. If Gordon sat still, Miles mused, he had a home for life, but greed will be the thing that throws him onto the street. He doesn't know this exists, I said. No, I was going to read the will next week. After the dust settled, he jumped the gun because of his debts. I looked at Miles. So, if he signs a deed of sale today, he is selling a house he just lost the right to occupy. That is fraud. That is fraud on a massive scale, Miles agreed. Especially if he accepts money for it. Then let's help him do it, I said. I outlined my plan. It was risky. It required precision. I told Miles about the email Gordon had sent to the investors. I told him we needed to intercept that process. We need a buyer, I said. We need a cash buyer who looks legitimate, someone who can move fast, someone who will offer him exactly what he needs to pay off the loan shark, plus a little extra to make him feel smart. Miles tapped his pen on the desk. I can set up a shell company, an LLC. I have done it for clients who want privacy. We can call it Harbor Vale Equity. It sounds corporate and vague. Harbor Vale Equity, I repeated. Perfect. We send him an offer today. We tell him we can close in 48 hours. Cash. If we do this, Miles said, his tone turning serious. We have to be careful. We are effectively conducting a sting operation. We cannot be seen as entrapment. We are simply presenting an opportunity. He is the one who has to make the choice to lie. He is the one who has to present the forged deed. He will, I said confidently. He is desperate. He won't check the background of the LLC. He won't ask for references. He just wants the wire transfer. I will need to bring in a private investigator, Miles said. Someone licensed. We need a witness in the room who isn't you or me, someone who can testify that Gordon signed of his own free will. Without coercion. Do it, I said. Whatever it costs. Take it out of the estate. Miles nodded. He opened his laptop and started typing. I will draft the offer letter. I will make it look standard. I will set the closing at a title company I know one where we can control the room. Whitmore Title, I suggested. Gordon loves places that sound fancy. He thinks he's a big shot. Whitmore it is, Miles said. He stopped typing and looked at me. Aurora, you know that once we start this, there is no going back. If he signs that paper, he goes to prison. He is your stepfather. He has been in your life for 10 years. I looked at the dusty file on the desk. I thought about the night before, watching him laugh while he drank my mother's wedding scotch. I thought about Kara wearing the necklace. I thought about the signature that looked like a tremor. He isn't my family, I said. He is a parasite, and I am just the medicine. Miles nodded slowly. Very well. He stood up and walked over to the sidebar, where he kept a decanter of water. He poured 2 glasses. He handed one to me. To Eleanor, he said. To Mom, I replied. I took a sip of the water. My gaze drifted to the wall behind Miles's desk. There were framed photos of his career highlights, handshakes with governors, groundbreakings for libraries. But in the corner, there was a small, black and white photo of a group of people at a charity gala from 20 years ago. My mother was in the center. She was laughing, her head thrown back, radiant in a sequined gown. She looked fierce and happy and invincible. I stared at her face, for the first time since she took her last breath. I didn't feel the crushing weight of loss. I felt a surge of connection. She hadn't left me alone. She hadn't left me defenseless. She had anticipated this moment. She had known that one day I would need a way to fight back against a world that tried to take everything from me. She had hidden a sword in the stone of that legal document, waiting for me to pull it out. I touched the glass of the frame gently. "I understand," I whispered to the woman in the photo. I turned back to Miles. "Let's write that offer letter," I said. "I want to make sure the price is exactly enough to make him think he got away with it." Creating a trap is not unlike composing a symphony. You cannot just crash the cymbals and hope for noise. You need rhythm, you need structure, and you need to guide the listener, or in this case, the mark exactly where you want them to go without them realizing they are following a score. Miles sat behind his desk, his fingers moving across his mechanical keyboard with a rhythmic clatter that sounded like gunfire. He was not writing a legal brief this time. He was birthing a ghost. In the state registry, Harbor Vale Equity, LLC, did not exist 10 minutes ago. Now, it was a fully incorporated entity with a registered agent in Delaware. A generic website featuring stock photos of glass skyscrapers and smiling people in suits, and a digital footprint that looked boringly legitimate. It was a shell, hollow on the inside, but from the outside, it looked like money. "This is the beauty of bureaucracy," Miles said, hitting the enter key with a flourish. To a desperate man, a letterhead and a tax identification number are enough to suspend disbelief. "We are ready to cast the line I asked." Leaning over his shoulder, "We are," Miles nodded. "But remember, Aurora, we do not throw the bait in his face. We make him swim for it." We spent the next hour drafting the email. It had to be perfect. If we sounded too eager, Gordon would smell a rat. If we sounded too distant, he might panic and go with one of the bottom feeders from his own email blast. We needed to be the Goldilocks of predatory investors, professional, liquid, but demanding. The email was sent from an alias account, acquisitions@harborvaleequity.com. "Dear Mrs. Vance," it began, addressing my mother because Gordon was still masquerading as her. "We have received your notification regarding the off-market disposition of the property. Harbor Vale. Equity is currently looking to deploy capital before the end of our fiscal quarter to satisfy tax exchange requirements. We are interested in a quick, all-cash acquisition of your estate." We paused there. Now came the number. Gordon had listed the house mentally at $1.2 million. It was worth that, easily, given the market, but we couldn't offer that. "Offer him $950,000. I said. Miles looked at me over his spectacles. "That is a low ball. A 20% haircut." "Exactly," I said. "If we offer full price, he thinks it is too good to be true, or worse. His greed kicks in and he thinks he can get more. But if we offer less, he feels the pressure. He feels the insult. And then, he fights back. He needs to feel like he won the negotiation." Miles smiled. A dry, thin expression. "You are learning." He typed in the number $950,000. Closing within 48 hours. No inspection. As is condition. That was the key. As is. It signaled that we didn't care about the condition of the roof or the plumbing. It signaled that we were just moving money around. For a man hiding a forgery and terrified of anyone looking too closely at the details. No inspection was the sweetest phrase in the English language. We sent the email, then we waited. I opened my laptop and pulled up the camera feed from the study. It was mid-morning. Gordon was pacing again, his phone in his hand. Kara was on the sofa, scrolling through Instagram, looking bored. The ping of the email notification on my mother's computer was audible through the camera's microphone. Gordon stopped pacing. He sat down heavily in the leather chair. I watched his eyes scan the screen. I saw his eyebrows shoot up. Then I saw them furrow. He turned to Kara. "We got a bite?" he said, his voice trembling slightly. Harbor Vale Equity. They want to close in 2 days. Kara sat up. 2 days. That beats the deadline. How much? Gordon grimaced. $950? Kara scoffed. That is insulting. The Zestimate is 1.2. I know what the Zestimate is, Gordon snapped. But I don't have time to stage an open house. Kara, I have guys in a car outside watching my front door. He looked back at the screen. He was doing exactly what I predicted. He was doing the math in his head. $950,000 would pay off the loan shark, cover the fees he owed to his gambling ring, and leave him with a healthy chunk of change to run away with. It was enough. But he was Gordon. He couldn't just take it. I'm going to counter, Gordon said, cracking his knuckles. I will tell them we have another offer at $1.1 million. I will tell them if they match it. We close tomorrow. I watched him type the reply. I felt a cold satisfaction coiling in my gut. He was negotiating with a ghost. Back in the law office, Miles's inbox pinged. He wants $1.1 million, Miles said, reading the reply. He claims to have a competing offer from Redstone Partners. I laughed. Redstone Partners. That was the name of a fictional company in a movie we watched together last Christmas. He is lying. Give it an hour, Miles said. Let him sweat. We waited exactly 60 minutes. In that hour, I watched Gordon on the camera. He checked his email every 30 seconds. He poured himself a drink at 10 in the morning. He yelled at Kara for chewing gum too loudly. He was unraveling. Finally, Miles sent the reply. We cannot meet $1.1 million. However, due to our urgent need to disperse funds before the Friday deadline, we can offer $1,050,000. Final offer. Take it or leave it. We need a signed agreement by noon. $1,050,000. It was a massive sum. And it was completely imaginary. I watched Gordon read the email. He pumped his fist in the air. Yes, he shouted. Kara, look at this. I squeezed them for another $100,000. That is how you do business. He turned to Kara, his face flushed with victory. See, I told you. I am the closer. I controlled the frame. He wasn't controlling anything. He was walking the plank, and he was bragging about how nice the wood felt under his feet. But then, the twist happened. A twist that Miles had not predicted, but one that played right into our hands. Gordon started typing a new reply. We accept the offer, he said as he typed, narrating his own actions for Kara's benefit, but there is a condition. My wife is very ill. She cannot travel to a title office, and I want to keep this private. I do not want neighbors seeing title officers coming in and out. He paused. I want to sign with a private mobile notary. Or better yet, can we sign at your representative's office? I want to avoid the local title companies. They are too slow. I looked at Miles. He is trying to avoid the local network. I said, he knows the local notaries might recognize Mom's name or know she just died. He wants to go somewhere neutral, somewhere he thinks is safe. Miles nodded slowly. He is trying to bypass the standard vetting process. If he insists on a private signing, he is actively circumventing the safeguards. That proves intent to defraud better than any video could. We will grant his wish, Miles said. He typed the final confirmation. Agreed. To expedite the process, we will host the closing at our escrow partner's satellite office, Whitmore Title Settlement, Friday, 9 a.m. Bring the original deed and identification. Whitmore Title did not exist. Well, the name existed on a brass plaque that Miles had ordered 2 hours ago. The office was a high-end executive suite rental in the financial district, one of those places where you can rent a boardroom by the hour. We had booked it for Friday morning, but we needed one more element. We needed a witness, not just Miles. We needed someone with a badge, but who didn't look like a cop. Miles picked up his phone and dialed a number. Frank, it is Miles. I have a job for you, yes. It is the Vance estate. No, not a probate audit. I need you to play a role. I need you to be the senior escrow officer for the buyer. He listened for a moment, then looked at me. This is Frank Thorne, Miles whispered, covering the receiver. He is a forensic investigator for the State Financial Crimes Division. He owes me a favor from a racketeering case last year. If Gordon signs that paper in front of Frank, he is signing it in front of the state government. Miles turned back to the phone. Frank, wear the expensive suit, the blue one. And bring your badge, but keep it in your pocket until I give the signal. The trap was set. The closing was scheduled for Friday morning. That gave Gordon exactly 48 hours to feel like a king. I spent the rest of the day monitoring the house. Gordon was manic. He started packing, which mostly involved throwing things into garbage bags. He wasn't sorting. He was looting. I saw him take the silver candlesticks from the dining room and shove them into a duffel bag. I saw him take the small safe from the closet, the one I knew contained my mother's savings bonds, and put it by the door. He was liquidating everything. He was going to leave the house a hollow shell for the new owner. At one point, he got another call from the loan shark. It is done, Gordon told the man on the phone. Friday morning, I will have the wire by noon. You get your money, plus the vig. Just call off the dogs. He hung up and slumped against the wall. He looked exhausted, but relieved. He truly believed he had pulled it off. He believed that in 2 days, he would be debt-free and rich. I sat in the law office, watching the sun go down over the city. The offer letter was signed. The fake LLC was registered. The fake title office was booked. The real investigator was briefed. I looked at the date on my watch. Wednesday, 2 days. Gordon had 2 days to enjoy the house he had stolen. 2 days to sleep in my mother's bed. 2 days to wear the crown. I closed my laptop. Enjoy the champagne. Gordon, I whispered to the dark screen, because the hangover is going to be terminal. Success is a heady drug, but premature success is a lethal overdose. I sat in the darkened corner of the law office library, my laptop screen glowing with the live feed from my childhood home. Watching Gordon Vance overdose on a victory he had not yet earned. It was Thursday afternoon. The closing was scheduled for Friday morning. To Gordon, this meant he had already won. The fear that had defined his movements for the last 3 days, the twitchy glancing at the windows, the jumpiness every time a car backfired, had evaporated. In its place was a swagger that was almost painful to watch. He was in the living room, wearing a silk bathrobe that he must have dug out of the guest closet. He held a glass of my mother's best crystal, filled to the brim with cheap scotch he had bought at the corner store, having finished the Macallan the night before. I am telling you, Kara, he said, gesturing grandly with the glass, sloshing amber liquid onto the Persian rug. We are going to need passports, not the ones we have, new ones. Kara was curled up on the sofa, surrounded by travel brochures she must have picked up from a travel agency in town. She didn't look up. Why do we need new passports? Gordy, we are just going to Mexico. You don't need a fake name to go to Cabo. Gordon shook his head, looking at her with the condescending pity of a man who believes he is a criminal mastermind. You think small. Babe, Cabo is for tourists. We are going to Belize, or maybe the Caymans, somewhere with banking laws that respect privacy. Once I get this wire transfer, I am not staying in this state. Those loan sharks, they have reach. I need to disappear. He took a long drink. Besides, he added, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, I have always wanted to be someone else. Gordon Vance is tired. Gordon Vance is broke. But Arthur P. Sterling, he sounds like a man who owns an island. I watched him preen in the mirror over the mantel. He was delusional. He was planning a fugitive life based on movies he had seen in the 80s. He didn't understand that digital footprints are forever. He didn't understand that you cannot outrun a wire fraud charge to the Caymans. Kara, for her part, was already spending the money she thought was coming. I need $5,000 for the shopping trip tomorrow, she said, circling something in a magazine. I can't go to a resort looking like this. I need new bikinis and a Louis Vuitton carry-on, and I want to upgrade my phone. 5,000? Gordon laughed. Baby, tomorrow afternoon you can have 50,000. We will walk into the boutique and buy the whole rack. They were dissecting the corpse of my mother's estate before it was even cold. It was grotesque, but what made it worse was the mundane nature of their greed. They weren't plotting to build an empire. They were plotting to buy designer luggage and drink margaritas. They were selling my history for a permanent vacation. Then, the phone rang. Gordon's demeanor shifted instantly. He straightened his spine, cleared his throat, and answered. It was the loan shark again. I could tell by the way Gordon's hand tightened around the glass. Yeah, I'm here, Gordon said, his voice dropping an octave, trying to sound tough. I could not hear the other side of the conversation, but I could guess the content. Where is my money? Listen to me, Gordon said, walking toward the window and peering out through the blinds. The deal is done. The papers are drawn. I sign tomorrow at 9. The wire clears by noon. You will have your cash in hand by 1 o'clock, including the late fees. He paused, listening. Yeah, I know what you said about my fingers. You can keep your threats. I am a man of my word. Just tell your boys in the sedan to back off. They are making the neighborhood look bad. He hung up and exhaled sharply, his chest heaving. He turned to Kara, a shaky smile plastered on his face. See handled. I told him, I am the one in control. He wasn't in control. He was terrified, but his terror was fueling his recklessness. He needed to believe he had won, so he started making mistakes. The biggest mistake happened an hour later. I saw Gordon pick up his phone again. This time, he wasn't calling a thug. He was calling a number I didn't recognize, but the conversation made my blood run cold. Yeah. Is this Miller Estate Liquidators? Gordon asked. My heart stopped. I have a house full of furniture. Gordon continued. Antiques? Mahogany? Some silver? I need it gone. Tonight. I leaned closer to the screen, gripping the edge of the desk. No. Yeah. I know it is short notice, Gordon said. Look, I don't need top dollar. I just need it empty. Bring a truck. Give me, I don't know, $5,000 cash for the lot, and you haul it all away. He was selling the furniture, my mother's piano, the dining table where we had eaten every Thanksgiving dinner for 30 years, the rocking chair from the nursery. He was selling it all for scrap prices just to squeeze a few extra $1,000 out of the house before he handed over the keys. He wasn't just stealing the house, he was gutting it. He wanted to leave me with nothing, not even a chair to sit on. I stood up, my impulse to run to the car and drive over there screaming almost overwhelming. I wanted to burst through the door and stop him. I wanted to save the piano. Miles, who had walked into the library to check on me, saw my face. He looked at the screen, then at me. He is selling the contents. Miles said softly, He is selling everything. I replied, my voice choking. The piano. Miles. She taught me to play on that piano. Miles put a hand on my shoulder. His grip was firm. Aurora, listen to me. I looked at him. If you go over there now, you stop the sale of the furniture. You save the piano, but you tip your hand. Gordon realizes you are watching. He gets spooked. He cancels the closing tomorrow. He claims he has a right to sell the furniture because he lives there. He drags this out. I know, I whispered. If you let him do this, Miles said, his voice hard but necessary. He adds grand larceny to his rap sheet. He is selling assets that do not belong to him. The value of that furniture is over $50,000. Selling it for $5,000 is criminal mismanagement of the estate. It is another nail in his coffin. But the piano. We will get it back, Miles promised. We will track the liquidator. We will get a court order to seize the items as stolen property. But you have to let him load the truck. You have to let him dig the hole so deep he can never climb out. I sat back down. I forced my hands to uncurl. I watched the screen as, 2 hours later, a beat-up box truck pulled into the driveway. I watched 2 men in coveralls haul my mother's life out the front door while Gordon stood on the porch, counting a stack of $100 bills. I did not cry. I cataloged. Every item that went onto that truck was a separate count in the indictment I was building in my head. Gordon pocketed the cash and went back inside, looking triumphant. He had just made $5,000. He thought he was a genius, but he wasn't done. Around 6 p.m, the doorbell rang. It was Mrs. Gable, our next-door neighbor. She was a kind, nosy woman who had brought casseroles every day since Mom died. Gordon opened the door. He put on his sad face, the one he practiced in the mirror. "Oh, Mrs. Gable," he said, sighing. "I just wanted to check on Aurora." Mrs. Gable said, "I haven't seen her car. Is she all right?" "I made her some lasagna." Gordon shook his head, looking down at his feet. "I didn't want to say anything. It is a family matter." "What is it, Mrs. Gable asked, leaning in. Gordon looked up, his eyes wide with fake sincerity. "Aurora is having a hard time. With the grief, she relapsed drugs." Gordon whispered, "It started when Eleanor got sick, stealing pain meds. I tried to help her. But after the funeral, she became violent. I had to send her away, to a facility, a rehab center in Vermont. My mouth fell open. He was destroying my reputation. He was painting me as an addict to explain why he had kicked me out." "Oh, that is terrible," Mrs. Gable gasped. "Poor Aurora. It is for the best," Gordon said, wiping a non-existent tear. "I am selling the house to pay for her treatment. It is very expensive, but I would do anything for that girl. She is like a daughter to me." He was using his crime to cover his other crime. He was framing the sale of the house, the theft of my inheritance, as a noble sacrifice to save me from addiction. The rage that filled me then was cold and absolute. It was no longer about the house. It was about the truth. I opened my backpack. I pulled out a folder. Inside were 6 months of hospital records, every invoice signed by me, every check written from my personal account to pay for Mom's copays. I had emails from her oncologist thanking me for my detailed notes. I had a letter from the hospice nurses commending my dedication. I was not an addict. I was the caregiver. And he was the parasite. 20 minutes later, Frank texted me a photo. It was taken through the window of the shop. It showed Kara standing at the counter, handing the ring to the clerk. She wasn't just getting it resized. She was getting it appraised. Then, she did something even stupider. She handed over another item. I zoomed in on the photo. It was the silver tea set, the one Gordon had missed when selling the furniture. She must have stashed it in her trunk. She was selling stolen goods on her own side hustle. Frank sent another text. "She just signed the receipt. I will go in there tomorrow with a badge and confiscate the logbook. We have her signature selling estate property. She is an accessory to theft." I smiled. They were eating each other. Gordon was selling the furniture to pay the shark. Kara was selling the silver to pay for her wardrobe. They were stripping the carcass clean, unaware that every item they moved left a trail of breadcrumbs leading straight to a prison cell. Back in the house, night had fallen. The house was empty of furniture, echoing and cold. Gordon sat on the floor in the living room, eating a pizza out of the box. He looked at his phone. He looked at the time. He sent a text. I saw the notification pop up on the burner phone Miles had set up for the fake LLC. "Everything is ready." Gordon wrote, "I have the deed. I will see you at 9 a.m. sharp. Don't be late. I have a plane to catch." He was so confident. He thought he was dictating the terms. I picked up the phone. I looked at his message. I could have written a long reply. I could have told him to enjoy his last night of freedom. I could have hinted at the storm that was coming, but I didn't. Silence is louder. Brevity is more terrifying. I typed 2 letters. "Okay." I hit send. On the screen. I saw Gordon look at the message. He nodded, satisfied. He tossed the phone onto the floor and lay back. Using a pile of dirty laundry as a pillow, he closed his eyes. He slept the sleep of the wicked, believing he had gotten away with it. I watched him sleep. Sleep well. "Gordon," I thought, "because tomorrow, you wake up in a nightmare." I closed the laptop. I had one more thing to do. I had to pick out my outfit for the closing. I needed something professional, something sharp, something that looked like justice. The conference room at Barrett and Crowley was silent, save for the rhythmic tapping of a pen against a legal pad. It was Thursday evening, the calm before the execution. The city lights outside were blurring into streaks of gold and red against the glass. But inside, the air was cold and sterile, smelling of old paper and lemon polish. Miles sat at the head of the table. I sat to his right. Between us lay the arsenal we had assembled for the morning. It was not a collection of guns or knives. It was paper. But in the world of estate law, paper cuts deeper than steel. "Let us run it one more time," Miles said, his voice gravelly with fatigue but sharp with focus. "Walk me through the blocking." I took a breath, centering myself. We arrive at the fake title office at 8:45. Frank is already inside, set up as the escrow officer. You and I wait in the adjoining room. We watch the feed from the hidden camera Frank has installed in the planter. "Correct," Miles nodded. "And when do we enter?" "We wait for the signature," I said. "Not the discussion, not the review. We wait until the pen leaves the paper on the final affidavit of title. That is the moment the crime is complete." Miles reached out and touched a stack of documents on the table. These were not the fake papers we had sent Gordon. These were the originals, the holy relics of my mother's intent. "This," Miles said, sliding a heavy cream-colored document toward me, "is the true last will and testament. And this," he tapped a thinner document stapled to the back, "is the conditional occupancy rider, the poison pill." I ran my hand over the paper. It felt substantial, real, unlike the flimsy forgery Gordon was carrying around. This document had the weight of history. "And the evidence of the breach?" Miles asked. I pulled out the file I had printed. The email from Gordon using Mom's account, the listing agreement he signed with the fake LLC, the inventory list of the furniture he sold yesterday, and the transcript of the video where he admits to the forgery. "Good," Miles said. "But we need the kill shot, the moment you walk in. Aurora. You cannot be the grieving daughter. You cannot be the victim. You have to be the judge." "I know what I'm going to say," I said quietly. "Let me hear it," Miles commanded. I looked him in the eye. I didn't blink. I let the coldness that had been building in my chest for 4 days rise to my throat. "You were never my father. You were just someone living off my mother's kindness, and you just signed it away." Miles nodded slowly. "Short, brutal, true, stick to that. Don't let him draw you into an argument about who loved her more. This isn't about love. It is about title." Just then, the door opened. Frank, the investigator, walked in. He wasn't wearing his usual leather jacket. He was wearing a navy blue suit, a silk tie, and wire-rimmed glasses. He looked every inch the boring, fastidious escrow officer we needed him to be, but the look on his face was serious. "We have a development," Frank said, tossing a manila folder onto the table. "What is it?" Miles asked. "I ran a deeper background check on Gordon's financials," Frank said, pulling out a chair. "Specifically, the entities he has been wiring money to. You know that loan shark, the one threatening his fingers." "Yes," I said. "He isn't just a street shark," Frank said. "He is a front for an underground gambling syndicate operating out of a social club in the warehouse district. It is called the Cavalier Club. They run high-stakes poker and illegal sports betting." I frowned. "So we knew Gordon was a gambler." "We did," Frank agreed. "But here's the kicker. I found a transaction from 3 months ago, a check written to the Cavalier Club for $10,000. Do you know whose account it came from?" I felt a sinking sensation. "Don't tell me." "It came from the Eleanor Vance Revocable Trust," Frank said. "He forged a check from your mother's trust fund the money meant for the local library donation to pay his bookie." Miles slammed his hand on the table. "That is embezzlement, pure and simple." "It gets worse," Frank continued, "because he used wire transfer for some of the other payments across state lines to their offshore accounts. This isn't just local fraud. If we hand this over to the feds, they can tag him with RICO charges. Racketeering, money laundering." I stared at the folder. Gordon wasn't just a desperate man trying to save his skin. He was a cancer that had been eating away at my family's resources for months. Long before the funeral. "This helps us," Miles said, his eyes narrowing. "It justifies the sting. We aren't just entrapping a man for selling a house. We are stopping a career criminal." "Frank," Miles said, turning to the investigator. Tomorrow, when you present the wire transfer confirmation to Gordon, I want you to be very specific about the language. Way ahead of you, Frank said, a sly smile touching his lips. I set up the transfer confirmation screen on the laptop he will see. It will show the full amount, $1,050,000, but the status will say, pending verification of title clear. Pending, I repeated. Exactly, Miles said. Legally, pending means the funds have been allocated but not disbursed. It satisfies the requirement for consideration in a contract, meaning the deal is real, but it ensures he never actually touches a dime. The money becomes evidence, not profit. He will see the numbers and go blind, Frank said. He won't read the fine print about verification. He thinks he is the smartest guy in the room. He is going to walk into that room thinking he is Caesar, I said. And he is going to leave in handcuffs. We wrapped up the meeting at 10 o'clock. Miles offered to call me a cab, but I refused. I had my car, and I had one place I needed to go before I could sleep. I drove out of the city, the highway lights stretching out like ribbons of fire. I didn't turn toward the motel. I turned toward the suburbs, toward home. I parked the car 3 houses down, just like I had done when I was a teenager sneaking out. I cut the engine and sat in the dark. The house was there. It looked the same as it had for 30 years, the white siding, the dark shutters, the big oak tree in the front yard, but it felt different. It felt hollow. The lights were on in the living room. Through the sheer curtains, I could see movement. Gordon was there. He was pacing again, probably rehearsing his lines for tomorrow, probably checking his reflection in the mirror, telling himself he was a winner. I looked at the window of the master bedroom on the 2nd floor. That had been my mother's sanctuary. Now, Kara was in there. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. I opened it. Inside lay a single pearl earring with a diamond drop. It was the mate to the pendant Kara had been wearing. My mother had given me the earrings on my 21st birthday, saying she would keep the necklace until I was married. A set should be together, she had said. Just like family. Kara had the necklace. I had the earrings. Tomorrow, I would place this earring on the table next to the photo of Kara wearing the pendant. It was a small thing, but it was irrefutable proof of theft. You cannot claim you bought a vintage set when the heir is holding the other half. I closed my hand around the velvet box. The metal was cold against my palm. I looked up at the house again. I let the tears come then. Just a few. Hot and stinging. I missed her. I missed her laugh. I missed the way she would hum while she graded papers. I missed the smell of vanilla and old books that always clung to her sweaters. Gordon had tainted this place. He had sold the furniture. He had soiled the memory. But then, I heard her voice in my head, clear as a bell. It was from years ago. I was 10, and a girl at school had stolen my lunch money and lied about it. I had wanted to scream at her, to fight. My mother had sat me down. She had brushed the hair out of my eyes. Aurora, she had said, anger is loud, but truth is quiet. If someone wants to rob you, don't scream, don't argue, just wait. Open the door for them. Let them walk in. Let them think they are safe. Because a thief who thinks he is safe is a thief who makes mistakes. Let them expose themselves. Let them expose themselves. Gordon had exposed himself. He had put it in writing. He had put it in emails. He had put it on video. I wiped my eyes. The sadness was still there, but it had hardened into something else. It had become fuel. I wasn't here to mourn the house. I was here to say goodbye to the version of it that Gordon had created. When I came back tomorrow, it would be to reclaim it, to purify it. I started the engine. I didn't look back as I drove away. I went back to the motel. I laid my clothes out on the cheap duvet. I chose a black suit, not a funeral suit, a business suit, sharp lapels, tailored fit, a white silk blouse, minimal jewelry. I wanted to look like the CEO of my own life. I didn't sleep much. I lay in the dark, watching the red numbers on the alarm clock change. 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock. when the sun finally crept through the cracks in the curtains. I was already up. I showered. I did my hair in a tight, low bun. I applied my makeup sparingly enough to hide the dark circles, but not enough to look like I was trying. I picked up the manila envelope containing the documents Miles had given me. The will, the writer, the evidence. It felt light in my hand, but I knew it held the weight of a sledgehammer. I checked my phone. One text from Miles' game time. See you at the site. I walked out of the motel room into the crisp morning air. The sky was a pale, steel blue. It was going to be a beautiful day. I got into my car and checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. The woman looking back at me wasn't the scared daughter who had been kicked out 3 days ago. Her eyes were dry. Her jaw was set. "Okay, Mom," I whispered to the empty car. "Let's go get our house back." I put the car in gear and drove toward the city, toward Whitmore Title, toward the end of the story Gordon thought he was writing. The observation room was dark, lit only by the blue-white glow of a high-definition monitor mounted on the wall. The air smelled of stale coffee, and the ozone scent of overheated electronics. It was a stark contrast to the room next door, the closing room, which was bathed in warm, artificial sunlight and furnished with a mahogany conference table that cost more than my first car. I sat on a folding metal chair, my hands clasped so tightly in my lap that my knuckles had turned the color of old bone. Miles stood behind me, his hand resting lightly on the back of my chair. We were spectators in a coliseum, watching the Lions enter the arena, unaware that the gates were already locked behind them. On the screen, the door to the conference room opened. Gordon Vance walked in first. He had dressed for the occasion. He was wearing a navy blue suit that I recognized. It was the one my mother had bought him for their 5th anniversary. It was a little tight around the middle now, the buttons straining against the paunch of a man who had spent the last 3 days stress-eating takeout pizza and drinking cheap scotch. But he had polished his shoes. He had combed his thinning hair back with too much gel. He wore a gold watch that glinted under the fluorescent lights. He walked with a strut, a chest-out, chin-up swagger that was meant to project power but screamed insecurity. He looked around the room, taking in the expensive art on the walls, generic abstract pieces Miles had rented for the day, and the view of the city skyline. He nodded, satisfied. To him, this room looked like money. Kara followed him in. If Gordon looked like a nervous groom, Kara looked like a bored widow-in-waiting. She was wearing a white dress that was entirely inappropriate for a business meeting, too short, too tight, and she had thrown a beige trench coat over her shoulders like a cape. She was chewing gum, her jaw working in a slow, rhythmic grind that picked up on the microphone feed as a wet, sticky sound. She was also on her phone. Her thumbs were flying across the screen. Frank, our investigator posing as the senior escrow officer, was already seated at the head of the table. He stood up as they entered, smoothing his tie. "Mr. Vance," Frank said, his voice a perfect baritone of corporate indifference. "Thank you for coming on such short notice. I am Frank Thorne. I will be handling the settlement today." Gordon reached out and shook Frank's hand. His grip was aggressive, a little too long. "Good to meet you." "Frank, this is my associate, Ms. Wells." Kara didn't look up from her phone. She just waved a hand vaguely in the air and sat down, dropping her designer bag onto the table with a heavy thud. I leaned closer to the monitor. I could see the screen of Kara's phone reflected in the glass of the water pitcher on the table. The resolution was incredible. I could almost read the text. Almost done. She was typing. "Book the flight for tonight. First class." She was texting a travel agent, or maybe another lover. It didn't matter. She was already mentally on a beach, spending my inheritance. "Please, take a seat," Frank said, gesturing to the leather chairs. "We have a significant amount of paperwork to get through. Our client, Harborvale Equity, is very eager to close this file before the banking deadline at noon." "I appreciate the speed," Gordon said, sitting down and buttoning his jacket. He tried to look casual, but I saw his leg bouncing under the table, a nervous tick. "I am a busy man. I have other investments to attend to." "Of course," Frank said. He opened a thick leather folder. "Let us begin with the provenance of the title. I have the preliminary title report here. The property is currently held in the name of Eleanor Vance. That is correct. Gordon said, "My late wife." Frank nodded solemnly. "My condolences. Now, to transfer this property to Harbor Vale Equity, we first need to establish your right to sell. You mentioned in your email that you have a quitclaim deed transferring ownership from Eleanor Vance to yourself prior to her passing." "I do," Gordon said. He reached into his briefcase, my mother's old leather briefcase, and pulled out a single sheet of paper. He placed it on the table and slid it across to Frank. I watched Frank pick it up. He put on a pair of reading glasses. He studied the paper for a long, agonizing minute. Gordon held his breath. I could see his chest stop moving. "This is dated the 21st of last month," Frank said, looking over the rim of his glasses. "Yes," Gordon said, his voice gaining a little strength. Eleanor signed it at the dining room table. She knew she was declining. She wanted to make sure I was protected. She was very clear about it. Frank tapped the paper. The signature appears strained. She was weak. Gordon said quickly, "It was the medication." But she was lucid, perfectly lucid. She read every word before she signed. I felt a surge of heat in my chest. Liar. On the 21st. My mother had been in and out of consciousness. She couldn't hold a spoon, let alone read a legal document. "And there is the matter of the heir," Frank said, flipping through his file. "The title search indicates Mrs. Vance had a daughter, Aurora Lawson." Gordon waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, Aurora. Yes. Does she have any claim to the estate?" Frank asked. "Because if she contests this after we close, it creates a liability for my client." Gordon let out a short, sharp laugh. "No, no claim at all." "Are you sure?" Frank pressed. "Usually. Children are named in the will." Gordon leaned forward, his elbows on the table. He lowered his voice, adopting a tone of confidential sorrow. "Look, Frank, Aurora is a troubled girl. Substance abuse issues, gambling debts. It broke her mother's heart. I gasped in the observation room. The audacity. He was projecting his own vices onto me. Miles put a hand on my arm. "Steady," he whispered. "Let him dig." Before Eleanor died. Gordon continued, lying with a smoothness that was terrifying. "We made a deal with Aurora. I gave her $50,000 in cash, my own money, and she signed a waiver. She took the money and left town. Last I heard, she was in rehab in Arizona. She doesn't care about the house. She just wanted the fix." Frank nodded slowly, writing something down on his legal pad. "So, you are stating for the record that Aurora Lawson has been compensated and has waived all rights to the property 100%. Gordon said. "And you have that waiver?" Frank asked. "I have it in my safe at home." Gordon stammered. "I didn't bring it because I thought the deed was enough, but I can send it over later." Frank paused. He looked at Gordon, then he looked at Kara. "Ms. Wells," Frank said, "you witnessed the signing of the deed. Is that correct? Your notary stamp is here." Kara looked up from her phone, annoyed at being interrupted. "Yeah, I was there. And you can attest that Mrs. Vance was of sound mind?" Frank asked. "That she was not. For example, heavily sedated or in a coma." Kara rolled her eyes. She snapped her gum. "Look, she was fine. She was sitting up. She drank a cup of tea. It was the Tuesday before she went to the hospital for the last time. She was totally with it." Frank froze. He looked down at his notes. Then he looked at Kara with a predatory sharpness. "The Tuesday before she went to the hospital," Frank asked. "Yeah," Kara said, shrugging. "The 21st, like the paper says." Frank leaned back. "That is interesting. Because the medical records attached to the death certificate, which are public record, state that Mrs. Vance was admitted to the ICU on the morning of the 20th. She was induced into a medical coma that afternoon. So on Tuesday the 21st, she would have been unconscious on a ventilator." The room went dead silent. I saw Gordon's face drain of color. He looked at Kara with eyes that could have murdered her right there. Kara stopped chewing her gum. She realized she had walked into a trap, but she tried to bluff her way out. "Maybe I got the day wrong," she stammered. "Maybe it was the Monday." "Yeah, it was Monday. I always get dates mixed up. Frank stared at her. He let the silence stretch until it was uncomfortable. He let them sweat. Then, he shrugged. Well, Frank said, returning to his bureaucratic tone, people make mistakes with dates. It happens. As long as Mr. Vance is willing to sign an affidavit of title, stating that the signature is genuine and obtained legally, we can proceed. The affidavit puts the liability on you. Mr. Vance, not the insurance company. Gordon let out a breath that sounded like a tire deflating. He nodded vigorously. Yes, of course. I will sign the affidavit. I stand by the deed. The date was just a clerical error. Frank pulled out a new document. It was a single page with a red stamp at the bottom. This is a sworn affidavit of title insolvency, Frank explained. By signing this, you are swearing under penalty of perjury that you are the sole lawful owner, that there are no other claims, and that all information provided is true. Gordon didn't even read it. He grabbed the pen. Wait, Kara said, her voice sharp. Gordy, maybe you should read it. I don't need to read it, Gordon snapped. I want the money. Kara. He signed his name. Gordon Vance. He pressed down so hard the pen nearly tore the paper. There, Gordon said, pushing the document back. Done. Now. Where is the wire Frank took the affidavit? He placed it carefully in a separate pile, the evidence pile. Excellent, Frank said. Now that we have cleared the title requirements, we can initiate the funds. Frank turned his laptop around so the screen faced Gordon and Kara. I watched the feed. The screen displayed a banking interface. It showed a transaction summary. Recipient Gordon Vance. Amount $1 million. $50,000 and 0 cents. Status, pending verification. Gordon's eyes went wide. His pupils dilated until they were black saucers swallowing his irises. He stared at the number like a starving man staring at a feast. He didn't see the word pending. He didn't see the trap. He just saw the zeros. Oh my God, Kara whispered. She leaned in, her greed overcoming her earlier hesitation. Is that live? It is in the queue, Frank said. I just need one final signature on the closing statement to release the hold. Once you sign this, the bank initiates the transfer. Frank slid the final document across the table. It was the HUD-1 settlement statement, the finish line. Gordon's hands were shaking visibly now, not from fear anymore, but from anticipation. He licked his lips. Give me the pen, Gordon said. He picked up the heavy metal pen Frank offered. I stood up in the observation room. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Miles looked at me. Now, Aurora. I smoothed my jacket. I checked my reflection in the dark glass of the monitor one last time. I looked dangerous. I looked ready. On the screen, Gordon lowered the pen to the paper. Just sign right there, Frank said softly. On the line marked Seller, Gordon scrawled his signature. He looped the G with a flourish. He dotted the period at the end of his name with a stab of finality. Done, Gordon shouted, dropping the pen. He looked at the screen, expecting the status to change to paid. Frank didn't move to the computer. He sat back in his chair. He interlaced his fingers. Is something wrong? Gordon asked, his smile faltering slightly. Hit the button. Frank looked at the camera lens hidden in the planter. He gave a microscopic nod. I walked to the door that connected the observation room to the conference room. I reached out and gripped the cold brass handle. Inside the room, Gordon was getting agitated, Frank Gordon said, his voice rising. Why aren't you sending the money? I turned the handle. Click. The sound was loud in the silence of the conference room. Gordon spun around in his chair, his eyes darting to the side door. He expected a secretary with coffee. He expected a bank manager. He did not expect the dead woman's daughter. The heavy oak door swung open, and I stepped into the room. The air inside was thick with the scent of expensive cologne and nervous sweat. Gordon spun around in his chair, his face flushed with the premature ecstasy of a man who believes he has just won the lottery. When he saw me standing there, flanked by Miles Barrett and 2 uniformed officers who had been waiting in the hallway, his smile didn't vanish immediately. It froze, twitching at the corners, a grotesque mask of confusion. You are too late. Aurora. Gordon sneered, his voice cracking slightly. He pointed a shaking finger at the computer screen where the words, "Pending verification," still pulsed in a calming green font. "The deal is done. The money is in the wire. You can't stop it." He looked at Miles, then back to me, his arrogance trying to claw its way back to the surface. "Go ahead. Sue me. I will fight you from the Caymans." I didn't say a word. I walked to the table, the heels of my boots clicking rhythmically against the hardwood floor. It was the only sound in the room. I carried a single manila envelope. I placed it gently on the table, right next to the fraudulent deed he had just signed. "You didn't read the fine print." "Gordon," I said softly. Miles stepped forward. He didn't look like the friendly family lawyer anymore. He looked like an executioner in a three-piece suit. "Mr. Vance," Miles said, his voice booming in the enclosed space, "you are operating under the assumption that you possess the right to sell this property. You believe that even if the deed was forged, which we know it is, you still had a claim to the house through your marriage." "I have a life estate," Gordon shouted, slamming his hand on the table. "I know the law. I can live here until I die. I have rights." "You did," Miles corrected. Past tense. Miles reached into the envelope I had placed on the table. He pulled out the original will and the specific rider my mother had attached to it, the poison pill. "Eleanor Vance granted you a conditional life estate," Miles explained, sliding the document toward Gordon. Key word: conditional. The primary condition states that any attempt to sell, encumber, transfer, or liquidate the asset immediately terminates the life estate. Gordon blinked. He looked down at the paper, but his eyes weren't focusing. "What does that mean?" he whispered. "It means," I said, leaning in so close I could smell the stale alcohol on his breath, "that the moment you signed that sales contract 5 minutes ago, you didn't just sell a house you didn't own. You legally evicted yourself from the one you did." I pointed to the signature on the affidavit. "By trying to cash out, you triggered the clause. Gordon, the house is now 100% mine. You are no longer a resident. You are a trespasser." The color drained from his face so fast, it looked like the blood had been siphoned out of him. He slumped back in his chair, his mouth opening and closing like a fish on a dock. Kara, who had been watching this exchange with widening eyes, suddenly moved. The realization hit her that the money train had not just derailed, it had exploded. She grabbed her designer bag and stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Well, this sounds like a family dispute," she said, her voice shrill. "I am just going to go. I have an appointment." She turned toward the door, her heels clacking rapidly. "Sit down, Ms. Wells," Frank said. He wasn't using his corporate escrow voice anymore. He was using his command voice. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his badge, slamming it onto the table next to the fake check. "State Financial Crimes Division." Frank announced, "You aren't going to any appointment. You are going to a holding cell." Kara froze. She turned back, her face a mask of indignation. "Excuse me, I am just the notary. I didn't know anything about his legal status. I am a victim here." "Stop it," I said. I walked around the table until I was standing right in front of her. She tried to look defiant, but I saw the fear trembling in her lower lip. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the small velvet box. I opened it to reveal the single pearl earring. I held it up next to the pendant resting on her chest. "That is a custom set," I said coldly. "My great-grandfather commissioned it in 1920. There is only one in the world. I have the earrings. You have the necklace." I tossed a photograph onto the table, the one Frank had taken of her at the pawn shop yesterday. "And here's a picture of you selling the matching silver tea service yesterday afternoon." I continued, "Possession of stolen property, trafficking in stolen goods, and since the value is over $5,000, that is a felony." Kara looked at the photo, then at Gordon. Her face twisted into a snarl. "He gave it to me," she screamed, pointing a manicured finger at Gordon. "He told me it was his. He told me the old woman wanted me to have it." "We have video of you searching the jewelry box while my mother was in the hospital," I said calmly. "We have video of you telling Gordon to strip the identity off the assets. You aren't a victim. Kara, you are the fence." Frank stepped forward, reading from a notepad. Gordon Vance and Kara Wells, you are under arrest. The charges are extensive: wire fraud, forgery of a legal instrument, identity theft regarding the use of Eleanor Vance's email account, grand larceny for the sale of the household furniture, and attempted theft of real property valued at over $1 million. Gordon looked at the computer screen again. The green text was still there. But the money? Gordon stammered, pointing at the screen. It says pending. The money is there. I can pay it back. I can pay everyone back. That money isn't going to you. Gordon, Frank said, closing the laptop with a snap. That money is now evidence. It is frozen. And since you signed the affidavit swearing you were solvent, you just committed perjury on top of everything else. The reality finally hit him. The walls of the room seemed to close in. Gordon looked at the window, then at the door where the uniformed officers were stepping forward with handcuffs. I only did it because I had to, Gordon shrieked, his voice rising to a hysterical pitch. He scrambled backward, knocking his chair over. You don't understand. They're going to kill me. The Cavalier Club. They said they would cut off my fingers. He covered his mouth, realizing too late what he had just said. Frank smiled, a cold, predatory smile. The Cavalier Club. Frank repeated, Thank you for that confirmation. Gordon, we have been trying to link that gambling ring to offshore accounts for months. Your confession just gave us the probable cause we needed to raid them. I am sure they will be very happy to hear that you are the reason they are going down. Gordon began to weep. It was a pathetic, heaving sound. He held his hands out as the officer clicked the handcuffs onto his wrists. The cold metal bit into his skin. A stark contrast to the gold watch he was wearing. Kara was screaming now as the other officer cuffed her. It wasn't my idea. He made me do it. I just wrote the script. Frank looked at her. You wrote the script. That is conspiracy to commit fraud. Keep talking, Ms. Wells. The court stenographer will love this. They were dragged toward the door. The carefully constructed facade of the wealthy widower and his young fiancé had crumbled into a mess of cheap fabric and desperate lies. As they reached the doorway, Gordon stopped. He dug his heels into the carpet. He turned his head to look at me. His eyes were red, rimmed with tears and terror. Aurora, he pleaded. Aurora, please, I am your father. I raised you for 10 years. I made a mistake. Don't let them take me. I am family. I looked at him. I looked at the man who had ignored my mother's pain to play poker, the man who had sold her furniture while her grave was still fresh, the man who had tried to erase my existence to make a quick buck. I felt absolutely nothing. No anger, no sadness, just a profound, quiet clarity. I walked over to him. I stood close enough that he could see the lack of pity in my eyes. You were never my father, I said, my voice steady and low. You were just a man who lived off my mother's kindness. You were a guest in our lives. I glanced down at his cuffed hands. And you just signed the checkout papers. The officers pulled him away. The door closed, cutting off his sobbing wail. The room fell silent. Miles exhaled a long breath and sat down on the edge of the table. He took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. Well, Miles said, that went exactly according to plan. I looked at the empty chair where Gordon had sat. I looked at the pen lying on the floor. Is it over? I asked. The criminal part is, Miles said, the civil cleanup will take a few months. But the house is yours. Aurora, free and clear. The deed he signed is void. The life estate is terminated. It is your property, effective immediately. I nodded. I didn't feel like celebrating. I just felt light. I drove back to the house alone. It was late afternoon by the time I pulled into the driveway. The sun was setting, casting long, golden shadows across the lawn. The house looked different. The for sale sign that Gordon had hammered into the lawn was gone. Miles had already sent a crew to remove it. I walked up the steps. I didn't use my key. I had called a locksmith on the way over. He was already there, finishing up the installation of a new deadbolt. All set. Miss, the locksmith said, handing me a shiny new brass key. No one gets in unless you want them to. Thank you, I said. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The house was empty. The echo of my footsteps was loud in the hallway. The living room was bare, stripped of the furniture Gordon had sold. The walls were blank where the paintings had hung. It should have felt sad. It should have felt desolate. But as I walked through the empty rooms, I didn't feel the loss. I felt the space. I walked into the kitchen. The sunlight was streaming through the window, hitting the spot where my mother used to stand and drink her coffee. I opened my bag and pulled out the small wooden box I had saved from the chaos, the one containing her true jewelry, the pieces I had rescued before Kara could get to them. I placed it on the counter. I took a deep breath. The air in the house was stale, smelling of Gordon's cheap cologne and neglect. I walked over to the window and threw it open. The cool evening breeze rushed in, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. It swirled through the room, chasing out the stagnation. I closed my eyes and listened. There was no shouting. No phone calls to loan sharks, no fake laughter. There was just the wind and the house settling around me. I had work to do. I had to buy new furniture. I had to get the paintings back from the police evidence locker. I had to paint over the scuffs on the walls. But for the first time in 6 months, I had time. I looked at the empty living room floor. I imagined a new rug, a new piano, a new life. Gordon had wanted to burn this house down to warm himself for a night. I had saved the structure, but the fire had cleared the rot. I touched the new key in my pocket. The cold metal was grounding. My mother was right. You don't have to fight the darkness with a sword. Sometimes, you just have to turn on the light and watch the cockroaches scatter. Or, in Gordon's case, hand him a pen and let him write his own tragedy. I turned away from the window and walked toward the stairs. I was going to sleep in my own room tonight. And for the first time in a long time, I was going to sleep soundly, because there are some people you don't need to destroy. You just have to be patient enough to let them destroy themselves. Thank you so much for listening to this story on Leona Revenge Stories. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Please drop a comment below with your city or country, and let me know what you thought of Aurora's revenge plan. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and smash the hype button to help this video get recommended to more people who love a good justice drama. See you in the next story.